Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Terry Eichel. I work with the Interreligious Ecojustice Network. We are a faith-based environmental group in Connecticut. And I'm so glad that you've joined IREJN and the Connecticut Green Bank and Temple B'nai Israel for a 60-minute webinar today on financing large energy efficiency and clean energy projects. I would first like to open with the IREJN's Land Acknowledgement Statement. We acknowledge that Connecticut, Algonquin for land on the Tidal River, is the traditional home of Mohegans, Pequots, and many other tribes. We are grateful to our Native people's care for their home and will strive to preserve it for the next 7 generations. Thank you. In the past 2 years, hundreds of houses of worship in Connecticut have participated in the Small Business Energy Advantage Program, reducing their energy consumption and their emissions. They have saved money, which has helped them serve their communities, and they've demonstrated leadership in the area of environmental stewardship. More and more, religious communities are looking for additional programs so that they can take deeper measures. And I'm glad to be joined today by Peter Ludwig from the Connecticut Green Bank to hear about the financing options available for the larger projects, such as heat pumps, EV charging, solar, and batteries. Peter will cover options for houses of worship as well as individuals. And we are also joined today by Sheila Amdor and Doreen Simonson, who will talk about their project at Temple B'nai Israel in Willimantic. After the presentations, we will have a moderated question and answer session. So please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we will get to them after the presentations conclude. So now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce Peter.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you for having us here today. And thank you everyone for joining, and also to Sheila and Doreen for joining to share your story and your journey, which I think will be really interesting to hear. So I have some slides. I think we're recording.
We are.
And you can have access to these slides. My contact information is on these slides at the end. So if you're the kind of folks who like to take notes, go right ahead. If not, don't worry. I'm happy to repeat all this again to you one-on-one. And I want to start with just our agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about who the Green Bank is, who we are, like why we do what we do, and then I'll go into talking about some of the programs. Most of the programs I'm going to talk about, including our CPACE financing program, our solar products, our energy storage solutions program, which is a battery incentive program, are for commercial properties. So that we would include synagogues, houses of worship under that, churches under that umbrella. The last program, our Smart E program, I'll touch on briefly, is actually for owner-occupied single-family or 1 to 4 unit residential homes. So I want to make sure I touch on that, as it might be that members of your congregation might be interested in that program as well for your personal residences. And then we'll hopefully have time for some discussion at the end. So just quickly want to touch on Connecticut Green Bank. We are what's called a quasi-public state agency, which is a sort of a mouthful, but basically we're created by legislature in Connecticut. We're created by statute, and our mission, as you can see here, is really to confront climate change by trying to make sure that people have access to accessible ways to invest in our green economy. And we really want to help communities become healthier, equitable, and more resilient. You can see our vision is a planet protected by the love of humanity. So I think there's a lot of sort of overlap between, Terry, between your mission and the way you work and the way the Green Bank aspires to work. Or as Brian Garcia, our director, says, you can't have environmentalism without humanitarianism. Now, this is sort of just the sort of highlight of this slide. Is this is sort of how we do what we do and why. We take small amounts of public money and we try to get private investment and investment into the state. So we're not a grant-making operation. We really want green investments to become more normal, more accepted in the market. So we're taking small amounts of electric ratepayer money. So all of you are helping to pay in just the way you pay into the utility efficiency programs, and we're trying to bring in for every $1 of public money, I think it's $7 of private investment into these projects. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is just that we really are focused on trying to help serve all of Connecticut's communities. I know that's a mission shared by a lot of you folks. So wanted to the main idea of this slide is that we do a lot of work across a lot of different sectors. As I said, most of what I'll talk about today is in our building solutions kind of line of programs. But we do a lot of other work. We work, if you're on a school board and you're thinking about solar, you should be talking to us. We also have a program that I'm not even talking about today called Green Liberty Notes, which falls under our investment solutions. And that's where people can make small denomination investments, kind of almost like a certificate of deposit account for a year long to earn some interest. And we actually turn around and invest those proceeds into the program that Terry mentioned, the Small Business Energy Advantage Program. So we're kind of involved in a lot of different places across the state, a lot of different ways of looking at our communities. Now I'm going to jump into sort of the nitty-gritty of the programs for our building programs. And the first program I'm going to talk about is CPACE. Now, CPACE, before I jump into that, I just want to kind of talk for a second, and I'm actually going to, on the next slide, there's going to be a little poll. So I want to hear from you all, just kind of thinking about, especially on this day where we're in this intense, sort of heat wave, heat dome, climate change induced heat dome. And I'm actually in we have a conference room that I'm in right now at work, which is the Greta Thunberg conference room. And she might be able to have focus back there, but she's there with her sign. And on the other wall, it says, "How dare you?" So I think, we're all thinking about that now. Why are we here? These are an example of some of the reasons why you might be here. And I wanted to give you a chance to, just take a minute, think about some of the reasons why you might be here. And I'll give you a couple minutes to just fill in use the QR code, or you can go to slido.com and put that number in and just share what are the most, it's a multi-select, you can pick as many as you want. Maybe it's all of these, but is it about energy costs? Is it about, the operating income of your nonprofit? Is it just about it's incredibly uncomfortable in our building? Or is it really more of a sense of stewardship or more of a theological or spiritual commitment that you or your congregation is making? Okay. Give people a little more time to fill this out, but it looks like strong commitment to stewardship and an equally strong commitment to energy costs, which are high. Improving building comfort. Okay. Great. That gives us a great sense of sort of what you all are thinking right now. People are still going, but I think I'm going to move on just because I want to make sure that our next presentation has time as well. So now, thinking about those reasons, I'm going to present a couple of these programs that can be a support to achieving some of those goals. The first is CPACE, and CPACE is a financing program. Traditionally has been for energy, either energy efficiency or renewable energy, but recently has been included to, has evolved to include electric vehicle charging and climate resilience measures. So we can talk more about that in a couple slides. But essentially, it's low cost, long-term financing. You can go from terms are 5 to 25 years, and rather than a kind of mortgage, it's not a mortgage. It's actually secured and repaid through an assessment placed on the property. So it's very similar to a municipal tax assessment, like a sewer assessment or something like that. And that's a very secure mechanism. It stays with the property. So in the event that, you know, a property owner needs to sell the property, maybe moving to a different one, that assessment stays on the property. The new property owner can continue to pay back the loan on that assessment. So it's a very flexible tool. And the CPACE is actually just an acronym: Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. So it's kind of all in the name. It's for commercial properties. It's secured with this assessment, and it's for clean energy, but now we know more measures than that. The point of this slide is that you should know that all types of properties are using it, but that nonprofits, including houses of worship, are a big part of the program. The sort of highlight of this slide is that many folks are using the program to do renewable energy, such as solar, but also, a good almost a fifth of the projects and are just doing energy efficiency. And if you look at the projects that are energy efficiency or energy plus renewables, it's even more. And we're definitely interested in doing more of these types of projects and being more of a help to folks who need to do efficiency projects. And the other thing I wanted you to know is that for some folks, this might be kind of a new name. It's CPACE. What is this? It is a sort of innovative program, but it's been around for more than 10 years, and there have been hundreds of projects. And this number even is outdated now, but the cumulative sort of amount financed is over 350 million. So it's a very well tested program and been in the market for a long time. I wanted to touch on what you can actually finance with CPACE. And so, examples are, as we said in the last slide, almost 70% of the projects are renewable energy, mostly solar, but really any kind of renewable energy is eligible. Energy efficiency measures. If you want to put in EV charging stations, there's a lot of work that needs to go into that, whether it's the actual equipment, the trenching to run the lines to the building, upgrading or connecting to your electric service. So those are all costs that can be included. Perhaps you would love to do solar, but your roof is really old and you can't put solar on an old roof. You could combine those measures into a CPACE loan. So a sort of related cost or a cost that's required to actually do an energy project is an eligible cost. And then a new measure that was just included in the last couple of years that is still sort of evolving is climate resilience. And that could be things like making sure a building can withstand flooding, wind, fire. It could be things like what we call nature-based solutions, which is sort of thinking about like more sustainable ways, for example, to manage stormwater. So instead of a parking lot where the water just runs off, it could be what we call pervious, where there's drainage for the stormwater to go back into the groundwater. Or it could be something there's an insurance designation called fortified, which is a way of building like a much more climate resilient roof. So we have that element in the program as well. This is a relatively new program, a part of the program, so we don't know what the exact needs will be yet, but this is evolving and exciting. Now, I wanted to also given that background of what's eligible under these different categories, wanted to get a sense from you as to what type of projects you're thinking about doing now. So I'm going to give you a minute to fill out those to fill out this slide. Okay, so a lot of folks interested in solar. It's great to see some interest in batteries and resilience. We'll talk a little bit more about batteries soon. Okay, give you another few seconds to if anyone wants to add anything else. Otherwise, we'll move on. I think this gives us a good snapshot. Okay, thank you everyone for providing that insight. Um, the only point of this slide is that if your CPACE can be used for new construction, I'm not going to dwell on this, but if you are thinking about an addition or renovating an old building, we can CPACE could be a tool for that as well. So I want to share a couple of like customer stories that are, one is more of a faith-based institution. This is just generally a nonprofit, but to give you a sense of like what are especially nonprofits and faith-based institutions doing. We did a project with Mystic. You can see, you can imagine nonprofits with old buildings, deferred maintenance, lots of equipment. And in this project, we were able to help Mystic do a pretty comprehensive energy project that included solar, there were HVAC, heating and ventilation and air conditioning upgrades, more efficient lighting. They obviously have a lot of systems to kind of life to keep their sea life alive and keep the water correct, running correctly and the conditions correct. So this is a project where I think similar to a lot of you on the line, they have an environmental mission, and they were really excited about saving $1 million, but also just the environmental impact of the project was really important for them to be able to feel and also demonstrate the folks who are part of their community or who are coming to the aquarium. Now, another interesting story, this is the Daughters of Mary in New Britain, and they did a couple of phases of this project that they basically created a microgrid. They had some extra land. They started by doing a pretty large solar PV system, then came back to add a really large battery storage system. So this is, I think, one of the first projects where they can actually be sort of islanded in case of a power outage for, I think, up to a day, and saving them a ton of money, which is excellent because it allows them to reinvest back into the programs they're doing to help community and help vulnerable populations. And so this is a really amazing story of actually the woman in the quote, Mother Mary Jennifer, actually after the first phase of the solar PV installation was about 5 years ago and had since passed away, and was not here to see the second phase of the battery, but really was recognized as being the sort of innovator of this project. And so this was a really meaningful project that we were able to be involved in with many partners. And we can share more about this project as well. But just a reminder that depending on where your building is and the complexity and how much land you have, you can really think big, and there are ways of getting these sort of larger projects done. Now, I want to touch quickly on a couple of other programs, and I think the point of this slide, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but there are ways to go solar that do not involve, a CPACE loan. And these are basically options where you might not own the solar array, you might just be getting a financial benefit. So there's some flexibility. And I think I'm going to skip through a couple of these slides because I think the level of, if you start exploring solar, you'll be working with contractors, and we can sort of compare and contrast. If you want financing, is CPACE a good option? Would one of these alternative versions be an option? And they are pretty clearly laid out in the slides, but given our time, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'd like to talk briefly about two more programs. One is our Energy Storage Solutions program. And this program was created by the state. We run it in concert with the UI and Eversource. And the idea of this program is that at a sort of large scale is that on a day like today, when everybody goes home, turns on their air conditioners and appliances, it creates a lot of stress on our electric grid. And in those times, we call that peak demand. the utility companies sometimes have to turn on backup power plants, backup sources of power to meet that peak demand, and those are often dirtier, more expensive fossil fuel powered plants. So the idea behind this program is that if we can get a lot of battery storage out on the grid, then we can draw on that power on a hot summer day and reduce that need to draw on dirtier power. And we're actually doing this right now. Our team this week has been working on deploying power from batteries all across the grid to meet that need. And for you, it's a great program because your electricity price is not based on only just on how much you use, but it's on your peak demand. So how much you use at the time of the highest consumption will actually create higher costs throughout the year. So if you can use a battery to smooth out that peak a little bit, then your costs will be lower all throughout the year. Also, you might have a facility where you have maybe you have a cooling center or a food pantry. You can't afford to have your power go out, so this could provide backup power. There's also really rich incentives through this program if you're a UI or um, uh, excuse me, Eversource customer. And then if you need financing, you can use a program like CPACE to finance them. And this program is eligible to any UI or Eversource customer. It's not just for commercial properties. So if you have a home, you could potentially look at a battery as well. You could pair it with storage or have a standalone battery. And now the last thing, I'd like to switch gears a little bit because one of the things that Terry and I were talking about is that you know, for folks who are homeowners or in your congregations, you might want to start working with folks on, hey, how can we make our homes more efficient? So we have a program called the Smart loan, and it is a loan available to 1 to 4 unit owner occupied residential buildings. We actually work in partnership with lenders and contractors. So there are a lot of local banks and credit unions who will offer you this financing, and there's a list of contractors here through this link. Um, there's a many like energy improvements and increasingly also climate resilience improvements that are eligible in this loan. And what I would offer is we're happy to do follow-ups on this. We can, you know, if you feel like there's a lot of interest in your congregation, my colleague Bill is happy to speak with you, and we can share his information in a follow-up. And he's a great resource for homeowner outreach. And we're really happy to work with you all on this program as well if you'd like. And this is just a customer story of a couple who used a Smart loan and replaced an old oil heating system and some other measures as well as geothermal, and got their energy cost to $630 a year, which is pretty fantastic. So I'm thinking there's a couple different ways to get started, especially when you're thinking about your commercial house of worship, commercial style properties. One is you can always reach out to us. You'll have my contact information, even a link to my calendar. I'm more than happy to meet with you and, you know, sort of figure out what are you trying to accomplish? What's the best way to go? Is it a green bank program? Is it someone else? You can also, if you haven't had an energy assessment, either from, you know, actually of the building for energy efficiency or a sort of solar assessment, that could be an option. And we can help you kind of find your way through that. Another option is to find a contractor. We have some CPACE registered contractors on our website. You're also, for a CPACE program, it's a completely open market program, so you can use whoever you like, as long as they're sort of licensed and insured and all that sort of thing. But you know, finding a contractor is also a good way to get started, just to get a sense of like what's practical, what are costs and paybacks going to look like. And then my last slide is just getting a sense from you as to what you're going to do next. And, and I'll give you a couple minutes to give us a sense of what you need to do next or what you'd like to do next. Right. Great. So it sounds like some people still would like to get energy assessments. Some folks would like to meet, which we're happy to do, and we can also help you find contractors. Great. So like I said, we'll be sharing this. Here's my direct line, my email, and if you'd like, you can also just um, schedule some time with me, and I'm happy to sort of talk you through how we might be able to help. If there are other partners, if it's a utility company or some other program, I'll help make that referral as well. And I want to thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to kick it back to you, Terry.
Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate that. As Peter said, his presentation and his slides will be available after the webinar. I will be emailing them out and I'll also put them up on our website. And just also our website, especially under resources, if you go to the resources tab and then go down to the webinars, you will find a very large list of different webinars on a wide range of topics that we've done over the past few years that could hopefully be helpful. So now I'm going to bring Doreen and Sheila. They are from Temple B'nai Israel in Willimantic. And one of the reasons that I wanted them to talk is they started with a lighting project at through the Small Business Energy Assessment Program in 2024 and have continued upon that journey and have really made exciting progress. And I thought it was a really great example because it is a sort of mid-sized synagogue in a not a super wealthy community. Willimantic is an EJ community and that sort of thing, but they have really been able to make it work for them and work for their community, and I'm really excited. So I'm going to share my screen with their slides. All right, hope everyone can see that.
Okay, are we ready to go?
Yeah, we are ready to go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm glad we could be with you today. This has been quite a journey for us. We um, we were facing what I call the trifecta. We uh, had a roof that had to be replaced. We had a very old boiler system that was failing, and we needed to replace a heating system. And one of our members, who's quite very good at capital projects, uh, discovered the green bank and discovered that we could install solar and that we could develop a solar installation that was long-term, low cost, and low impact funding for us and would generate about 150% of what we needed. So there was also some small financial gain, and obviously over time, quite a bit of financial gain because we won't have any electrical cost. So we looked at this to see could we then combine these three projects. Um, and Doreen is going to talk about that a bit more as uh, this is what I just was covering now. The but the net impact for us, or the goal for us, is that we become a net zero um, operating building, and uh, we will we'll get rid of our natural gas, and our electricity will be covered totally by the solar. And what we also saw, so this in terms of the environmental stewardship piece was extremely important to us. And the other piece was that we're investing in the next generation. And this is how our congregation has seen it. We're investing in making this building that was built in 1964 a workable, livable, usable building for all of our functions, for worship, for education, for community. Um, so let me, Doreen, do you want to
Well, I just want to say, so when we started this project, really was last fall, and we started working with EcoSmart Home Services, and they really were instrumental in helping lead us through this project. They did the energy assessment and helped us come up with a new HVAC system that we would use, and then came up with a solar project and how much solar we would need. And then with that, they have the engineers from Eversource who reviewed their proposal on how many panels we would need and exactly how much the savings would be. And it isn't exactly savings. What happens is, as Sheila mentioned, we will generate about 150% of our energy needs. So that 50% will come back to us, the 50% that will go to Eversource to be used for other locations will come back to us in a savings. So it was really a win-win for us to do this project. We were lucky that we did have some savings, that we were able to replace the roof and the HVAC system with with savings, and also we're doing a big capital campaign to replenish our capital improvement fund. But the solar obviously was expensive, and so we went to through the Connecticut Green Bank.
I think we could move on, Terry.
Oh, okay.
This
So-
just shows our
Mhm.
our failing infrastructure that showed that we really needed to get a new HVAC system in there.
Okay, keep going.
So it really was, as Sheila mentioned, really a plan for the next generation of congregants to have this new HVAC system, new roof, and have the solar to take them into the next generation. And as it says, we did a new roof. We had a modern, a new HVAC system that we'll be installing this fall, and then the solar panels will also be on that project will begin also in the fall, and then we will reach net zero energy efficiency through that solar.
So this next slide was really how we have, obviously we've done this presentation many times for our congregation and for friends. And so this was how I guess we're selling it. This is how we're presenting it to them. We thought that might be of interest to people here. Reducing operating costs, being sustainable, sustaining our future as a Jewish community. That this is a special donation. It doesn't replace other donations, and it's an investment in our holy place to sustain it for future generations. And Doreen, you're going to show our
Yeah,
finance.
so if you'd like to see how the numbers work, let's see. I gotta share. Now, is that larger? I tried to make this as large as possible.
Why don't you read the numbers?
Okay, sure. So the total cost of the solar project and our loan amount is a little over $250,000. The Connecticut Green Bank is giving us a 5.5% interest rate for 15 years. So the monthly loan cost for those 15 years is a little over $2,000. We will still have a very small monthly electric bill for, I guess there's fees and some required things that we'll have to pay, and that's about $186 a month. So our total monthly payment will be $2,263. So over a year, that's about $27,000 that we will be paying out of our operating account. But the excess energy that we will receive from Eversource that we will receive back is about 15,575 in back to us for a year. So the net cost for 1 year is the difference, obviously, is about a little over $11,000. And our budgeted electric expense for this past year was a little over $11,000. So for us, we see it as really a wash. We'll be paying the same amount out, but we'll be getting solar. And then after 25 years, after 15 years, the loan will be paid off and then that savings will become our total savings. Also, in year 2, we hope to receive that ITC federal incentive amount of money. That's should be about $74,000. And then according to Connecticut Green Bank, we'll use that to pay a good chunk of the principal, and then they'll amortize our loan, so then our monthly payments will be less. So after the 15 years, then our annual savings would be almost $25,000 a year after the loan is paid off.
So just during to notice or
Mhm.
to note, we have not counted on that federal incentive
No,
in terms of
right,
projecting out what is feasible for us to do, because we know that's very uncertain.
right. So,
Great. Thank you so much.
sure.
That is terrific. And that's not an uncommon story that House of Worship is facing a building infrastructure issue like a leaky roof that needs to be replaced or heating system that needs to be replaced or repaired. And so now is the perfect time to look at these types of energy efficiency or solar measures because it's dovetailed well. And one thing I'll direct you to is we have a webinar on called this Historic House of Worship that talks about funding for historic buildings, and that's something that actually is also often relevant for houses of worship. There is funding for those types of things, both restoration and sometimes it even includes energy efficiency when it's applicable. So um, that was done last November. I'm thinking about doing another one, especially as was just referenced, the federal picture is changing and is uncertain. So once we have a sort of a stronger picture of what's going to be available from the federal government, I will probably ask folks to, join me and talk about what the possibilities are. So, but let's do a little Q&A. So Don actually asked, what is the advantage? This is really for Peter. What is the advantage of doing financing through Connecticut Green Bank versus any of the solar panel companies?
So that's a good question. I think solar companies will, if you want CPACE financing, we will be the CPACE lender. So they will not usually be the ones who provide that financing. If you are looking to get I mean, they might provide alternative loans. I don't know what the terms and rates would be. I don't know if you'll get a fixed low interest rate for, up to 25 years. So I think you'd have to kind of shop around and see what you get. But many of the solar vendors will also provide some of the alternative financing I described, like the power purchase agreement or the roof lease. I think you'd have to kind of look at, you could look at what type of pricing you might get from them. I think the advantage of working with the Green Bank is just that we're here, we're not going anywhere, and we tend to spend like a lot of time with our customers, and we have, we're a little more of like a long-term presence in the market. I think if you find a contractor you like, then if they're providing a financing product that you like, then you should use them. I think we want to like encourage people to find the model that works for them.
Sure, absolutely. So Peter has a question. We have contracted for installation of new heat pumps at our church. We have not had any luck with engineering and financing a solar system. Any suggestions?
Let's see. So do you mean that you have not had luck finding a contractor, or that the sort of details of the project haven't worked out?
I'm going to.
And if it's too much of a detailed question,
Yes
to
to
both. Okay.
both.
Yeah. So I would say, going back to Doreen and Sheila's presentation, the sort of key thing in all this is sort of finding someone you really trust, finding a contractor who understands green bank programs, who understands utility programs, who understands the sort of ins and outs of like how to access the free and cheap money and what the timelines are and how to apply for things and when. so that they can kind of push the boulder up the hill for you. But if you are having trouble doing that, you know, we do have a list of contractors who are like registered for our programs, and we're happy to share some of those. But we don't, you know, we encourage market participation from everyone. We're not directing you to use one of them, but we're happy to, you know, if you feel like, okay, we're in this town and it's this size building and this is what we're trying to accomplish, we could try to help make some of those connections. And you know, you feel free to sort of reach out. Sometimes it does take, you know, there are some contractors who will only do certain size projects, or, you know, it's just hard to say, you know, without speaking in more detail. But we can definitely share the I can put our CPACE registered contractor list in the chat. It is searchable, but also it's just as easy if you want to just reach out and we can have a, you know, 10-minute conversation.
I know of a couple houses of worship, including Temple B'nai Israel, and there's a Catholic church in Middletown that are doing ground mounts, and a few that are looking at solar canopies. Have you done any work with solar canopies or that sort of thing? It's a good solution for houses of worship, especially the churches that have slate roofs and they can't.
Yep.
But also their
Yep.
houses of worship with just sort of oddly shaped, you know, unique
Hmm.
roofs that can't put solar on them.
Yeah, sure. We can do ground mounts, and I think they have been, like, sometimes they're a little costly. They're just more because there's so much like steel that's used to build
Right.
the system out. But and sometimes the connection to the electric service can be expensive, but they're certainly eligible, and we've done them. So yeah, I think all of these are, when you get into that level of specificity, it's really, yeah, talking to vendors, getting a couple of opinions. And of course, the real answer, to Peter's question is probably he should be speaking with, you know, Doreen and Sheila and other, you know, peers to see who they work with, and, you know, because they probably have more, you know, in some ways more insight than we do, because they're, you know, you all are really the customer, the end user. Um, but happy to make those connections as well from our perspective.
And then I just wanted to add, so we're doing a combination of ground mounts, and we have some flat roof, so it's a combination that we're
Right.
doing.
Right, which is actually, I mean, that's great. It's really creative way to put it together, I think. And I think that type of creativity is really helpful for houses of worship, you know. It's almost required. Um Diane wanted to say, um this is a terrific story. I think this is for Doreen and Sheila. Thank you for sharing. What is a financial term for the quote unquote savings that Eversource grants you for your excess production to the grid? Like term as in time period, or term as in wording?
Well, so the savings is going to be that for the 47% of excess energy that we'll produce from our solar panels, and that
She was actually wondering what does Eversource have a
As a
term?
credit, Doreen, do we get that back as a credit?
well, to be honest, we're not 100% sure how that's going to work.
Okay. They give us, as I think United Illuminating does too, there's what they're calling a tariff that they're paying us, right? To
Right. Right.
off-
They've agreed, right. We have a firm tariff agreement for them to purchase that, use that energy and pay us.
Yeah, so I think what you've done is your contractor has applied for and secured this 20-year, basically it's a 20-year agreement where the utility company, if it's Eversource or UI, the municipal utilities don't always have the same programs, but where they essentially buy the power back from you, and we call it the tariff, or we call it also, the technical term is the non-residential energy solutions program,
NRES,
which
yeah.
is, you know, a horrible thing to have to say out loud like over and over again. So and that's one of the reasons why I think having having a contractor who really understands that is key, because they are going to navigate that. They're going to there's a couple different ways you can apply, and a couple different ways the solar system can be set up. If, either you're selling excess power back to the utilities, or you're selling all the power back. And so it's sort of, it can get pretty technical, and having someone who can explain that to you in sort of simple terms, and explain to you what the best option for you is I think really important.
So we
I
really
think
saw it as an offset, the way that Doreen presented it in this, in her financial summary. I agree, the wording, tariff, probably is not a great thing right now.
to Peter, SB4 was a big energy bill that was passed this legislative session with some changes to solar, net metering, etc. Is this impacting your, or going to impact your program slash financing?
I don't know yet.
Right.
I don't think we know yet. Yeah.
It was, yeah, the bill kept changing. Even the final version of the bill was introduced the same day it passed the Senate, so it's a little bit unclear. And similarly, what's going to happen to the direct pay rebate um, is also unclear,
Yeah.
because of what's happening at the federal level. So we're just hoping that we can get as many people to be able to take advantage of that as we can, if and when it is taken away. So to that point, time is of the essence. If you are interested, it's definitely a good time to at least begin, start the investigation process. Another thing that's important to remember is that the utilities, Eversource and UI, approve solar projects twice a year, August 1st and February 1st. And so if you are working on solar, and you are interested in, being considered and getting it in soon, August 1st is your most upcoming deadline. Let's see here. Nick has raised his hand. How do I, what just happened? Wait, Q&A. Oh, there's only the Q&A. Nick just said, what is the best option for an Eversource customer to get an energy assessment? We also have a historic building. Do you have to pay the assessment cost up front, or is that cost covered by the program? Nick, as far as my experience has always been, the energy assessment is completely free. They'll come into your building and spend a couple hours with you, and give you as thorough. A lot of times they'll sort of start with the lowest hanging fruit in terms of your biggest return on investment, which is oftentimes some version or combination of lighting and or insulation, because those things are cheaper to replace and produce a big ROI. However, if you are interested in doing more, I would definitely advise you to ask for a complete assessment. So tell them what you're looking for and that sort of thing. Peter, what do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, it's a great point, because we sort of framed this webinar around the idea that most folks have already had an assessment, but Terry mentioned the Small Business Energy Advantage program through either UI or Eversource is a great way to get started, because you can get this assessment. They have a group of qualified pre-selected contractors who will come out. They'll offer you, they'll come back, in a few weeks with a report, and will say, do X, Y, and Z, and here are some upfront, here's some incentives right off the bat. You can also access up to $100,000 in financing that you can get on your energy. You could pay back on your energy bill over, I think, up to a 5-year term at
Yes.
0% interest. So this is like, if you have a $50,000 lighting project, like you should be trying to get it through the SBA program, not through CPACE, because it's, it's easier, it's 0% interest, you can pay it back in a couple of years. And you can always like mix and match the programs. So we have people come to us and use, if it's a larger project, but they're eligible for the SBEA program, you could always sort of use that $100,000 at 0% and then cover the rest of the project with CPACE, and just, it's almost like an interest rate buy down, essentially. So yeah, definitely, if you have a project if you have a building with more complex systems, you should connect with, try to make a connection with your utility and see if, they do have other options where they'll do kind of scoping studies or connect you with an engineer or an auditor. So, they have some flexibility and they have a lot of programs. So if the SBA program isn't quite giving you what you need, they might have other. I know they have a program where they offer these kind of scoping assessments where they will identify at sort of a high level what the opportunities are, and then I know they also can often connect you with vendors who can get more into the weeds if you have like a complicated cooling tower system, or you need new building automation controls or something like that. They can help with that. Does that help?
I'll just add that we did a small business project back in 24,
Great.
and that was for lighting. So we had an assessment. They came in and went through and showed us all the different lighting that we could change, how much the savings were, and then there was also, sorry, I can't remember exactly, but there was an incentive program, and so we did get an incentive. I think, I don't know, maybe $10,000 that was off the total cost. And then, like you mentioned, Peter, we pay it back, zero interest, and we pay it with as part of our bill from Eversource.
Yep.
So,
Exactly. Doreen's actually referencing the sort of subset of the small business program, which is called the micro business program. And that is based on usage rather than size of building. And so it's really important because most houses of worship they're classified as small businesses, but they're actually used, a few hours a day or a couple days a week and that sort of thing. So their usage actually falls under, and then they're eligible for a pretty significant initial rebate for their first project. And it's a maximum instant rebate of $16,000. So it can be, really significant. I had a church do a project that was about $22,000 of lighting upgrades, and they got 16,000 in immediately rebated off, and then we're left with a remainder that they were able to finance with a 0% interest. So that is also, again, something that's available. And when I said at the beginning, hundreds of congregations have done this, that was sort of what I was referring to, is that micro business, small business, they've done different programs that have sort of fallen anywhere between $20,000 and $50,000. So they've gotten rebates on
Yeah.
lighting, and then they've done a heat pump project. It's really common too to see houses of worship do things in phases. The phase one of lighting, and the next phase will be building envelope, looking at insulation and heat pumps, and they do that as a way to sort of soften the blow. They see the energy savings coming in, and so they're able to be recouping some of their costs, and then they're able to do the next step. um so Nick said, so do we start by talking to someone at Eversource and they'll be able to direct us to the best program? I have, and I believe there are some that are registered. Peter said, yes, we did that. MBA, great deal. um Nick, I've got some vendors similar to Peter. We've got some vendors that we work with really regularly that work with houses of worship a lot, and I'm happy to sort of send out that list too. They're great, and I will say, the vendors are all vetted by the utilities, and they do a great standard of work. One of the things that I like about the vendors that I specifically work with is that they really understand houses of worship. That houses of worship often have small staffs and are largely, decisions are made by several volunteers. Lots of committees have to decide. If the project is big enough, it usually can even come to a congregational vote. So they sort of understand the complexities of that. So I'll happy to send out that list of folks that I work with on a really regular basis that understand. And they're very fast. They'll get right in. The quickest with that initial energy assessment, actually scheduling the energy assessment is really key, because you can usually get that done within, a couple weeks. And then they have to write up their program proposal and then submit it to the utilities, for the utilities sort of look at it and verify, yes, this qualifies for this rebate, and then they send it back. So that process can actually take a month or two, or sometimes even 3. So getting the energy assessment piece project started is, important. You can get that done right away, and then you'll have some time to wait. But you're not obligated to move forward with just because you get a proposal doesn't mean you have to do anything. You can pick and choose what parts of the project you want to do, and if it really doesn't fit your financial picture at the moment, you don't have to move forward. So it's not an obligated thing. However, most folks actually do find that at least a good portion of it fits their financial picture and what they're trying to achieve for the house of worship. Houses of worship have been around, some of them in this state for hundreds of years, and so and the goal is for them to be around for 100 more. So people generally tend to look at this, even when it's a obviously we're all looking at our budgets, all looking at our financial lines. They're still looking at these as these are centers that serve their community and serve the people that both attend but also live directly around them, and they want to see them continue forth for generations. Any other questions?
Let me try to get that off. Terry, someone was wanted to be asked again about sharing of the slides.
Yes, so I will definitely. So I will. I'll put this up on this whole webinar up on our YouTube channel. It'll also be on our website under our resources tab and our webinar tab. And then the copies, PDF versions of the slides will also be available, so you can see those as well. And contact information, I'll share, contact information so you can reach out directly to Peter. Sheila, Doreen, I don't know if you're comfortable having your contact information shared, but you can also reach out to me. I'll put my contact information if you'd like me to do an introduction for Doreen and Sheila. I can do that as well. And I'll share the contractor list. So I'm happy to do all of that. We actually do have a webinar coming up in September on the small business program. Like I said, I try to do these at least on an annual basis because the programs can change. New things can get added. Some things can get shifted. And so I try to keep folks apprised of what is available now. So we're doing another small business, micro business webinar in September. And the other thing I'd like for you to think about too, as members of houses of worship, is that you are not just a house of worship, but you're filled with people from your community. There may be someone in your community that works for another nonprofit or a small business that might also benefit from these programs. I was actually just at a church in East Haddam, and the one of the members is a member of the Veterans for Foreign Wars, a VFW in his town, and they had just installed solar. So I thought, wow, that there's all these different community mutual aid type organizations that have connections into the houses of worship in their towns. And so we can also kind of be our own sort of network for them and providing them with this information. Because as Peter said, all the energy efficiency and all of the clean energy solar things we do not just help our immediate energy costs and our immediate emissions, but they help keep the energy rate down overall by driving down peak demand on, and helping us set a lower electric rate. Sound good? All right, folks. Wow, we are at 1 o'clock. I really appreciate everyone attending. I want to thank Peter and Doreen and Sheila for joining me. Thank you so much. I will get all this information out to everyone, and I'm really grateful to our presenters for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Grateful to be here.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Terry?